Well-mannered, well-dressed people. Speaking of well-dressed, can we have a little check on the sequins here from the speaker stage right? Yeah, thank you very much. Happy Eurovision Day is the message there. Who knew about that? Yeah, okay. Some fans in the audience. There we are. Feel free to take the hoodie off and display the whole thing if you're comfortable. All right, just
later.
Welcome, everyone. Come and sit near the front. Come and encourage our speakers by sitting right up and looking into the whites of their eyes. That always makes them give better talks. Everyone knows that.
Thanks for the reminder that I should clear my glasses.
There you go. Keep your glasses clear. You can see the audience can see you. Everything's going to be great. All right, we're almost due to start, so the final stragglers, run, or walk hurriedly towards the front. Come and sit right up near our speakers. Encourage them, make them feel good. When they feel good, they give better talks. When they give better talks, you have a better experience. Everybody wins. This is America. Everybody wins. That's how it works. Everyone agrees that the system is win-win, right? From every person in this room all the way up to the president. That's the attitude. Okay. Lynn, do you think we should take it away? Start on time? Like good people? Very good. Are you ready to go, ma'am?
I am, yes.
Please give Kathleen a big hand, everyone.
Hello. So hands up, how many of you have done some sort of volunteer programming opportunity through Code for Whatever or something like that? Yeah. How many of you kind of struggled and had some issues with it? Yeah. So I'm here to give you some helpful tips on how you can make these things go better. I actually work at an immigration nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and I've been on both sides of these. I have been that programmer, but I have also been the person in the nonprofit who's just, hoping we get something we can use at the end of it. So you start off these things. Yep. My left arrow button is sticking for some reason, and I don't know why. You start off thinking you're going to be seen like this, as some sort of knight in shining armor, magic wizard who can solve all their problems. And you end up feeling like these guys. Why does this happen? Conflict of expectations, really. You want time to hack on a project outside of work. You want experience knowing a new library or programming language. Really, you want a chance to give back to the community. And like I said, all nonprofits, all we want is a piece of technology that we can use that will help us meet our mission. So step one, do a little bit of research. Nonprofit workers, we're very mission-driven. If you take even 10 minutes to go to our website, read about what we're trying to do, it'll help you understand us a lot better. Also, you can look for key terms that you might not understand otherwise. I work in immigration. We speak in government acronyms. Working with someone who can kind of understand those is really helpful for us. And also in this category, I put set up those initial meetings that you have. Communicate early, communicate often to find out what the nonprofit's goals are and how you can best meet them. Step two is that you have to wear all the hats. I know at work you have PMs, you have designers, you have all these people you're working with, but frequently in a situation like this, it's just you. So you have to be the one to think through things like MVPs. You have to think about accessibility if you have any sort of interface. Another thing to keep in mind in this is that you're designing for two sets of users. So not only do you have to think about the end user, you have to think about the nonprofit workers themselves. They're the ones who are going to have to continue to maintain this once you're done. And if you're lucky, you will have someone at the nonprofit who will not be confused when you say, I need you to set up a storage bucket for me. But that might not always be the case. So make sure that it's user-friendly in that respect as well. Step three, explain yourself. And what I mean by that is that you have to write detailed documentation of everything you do, both for the people at the nonprofit. There's nothing worse than getting that email at 4:30 in the afternoon saying, I tried to run what you wrote for us and it was breaking. What do we do? Good documentation can frequently help with that. Another thing that helps is to use lots of open source options, because those frequently have good documentation already. They have communities that people can go to. This actually saved me once. We had a developer put something together for us. I couldn't get part of it to work, and then I realized, oh, this is an open source project from this company. I can go here and find all of their documentation, and was able to get that fixed. Also, in your code, comment everything. Make sure that somebody can come back and know what you were trying to do here. And one other key point that I want to mention in this is that I can pretty much guarantee you that people who work at nonprofits are not familiar with software licensing. Do us all a favor and just make sure you add something in there. Don't want a nonprofit to have problems later on. A lot of times we like to share projects we've done with partner organizations, and if licensing is already there, then that's one less thing for everybody to worry about. Like I said, nobody from the nonprofit's going to know it, but if you remember it, very helpful. So a few just kind of basic other tips. Under promise and over deliver. This goes back to making an MVP, keeping it something very simple that you know you can do. I know it's a side project and you're tempted to go, but I want to add this and these bells and these whistles. Don't. Set boundaries. Be upfront with nonprofits and say, look, I can only work on this on weekends, maybe one evening a week or something like that. And this is key. Follow through. Make sure that you only answer your emails in the evening. And if you leave here with nothing else, I ask you, please, whatever you do, keep it in a state where you can walk away at any moment and somebody can pick right back up. Things might go badly, but as long as somebody can pick up where you left off, that the nonprofits really appreciate it. We have more respect for you, and hopefully everyone wins.
Give Kathleen a big hand, everyone. All right, Kathleen was exactly on time, but let's have a little bit of a way of encouraging our speakers to get off at 5 minutes. So I'll have a little practice. When I, on stage, put up one hand, I want you all to start clapping with 2 fingers like this. Can you give that a practice now? Just clap with 2 fingers. Shh, come on. More. Everyone, just do this, 2 fingers. See that little sound of raindrops? That will be the warning to the speaker that their time is up and they are allowed to finish their sentence. And at the end of their sentence, I'll put up 2 hands. And when I put up 2 hands, please give them a big hand. All right, now we have a system, everyone. We have a system. So the next speaker is Jessica. She's talking about music and Python. I have a strong suspicion that the last talk was awesome and that this talk is going to be awesome as well, as are all the subsequent talks. Give her a big hand.
Hey, how's it going? I'm going to be talking to you guys about how to make music with Python and Foxdot. The slides for this talk are available at my website, jessicagarson.com/makingmusic with Python and Foxdot. There's also going to be a GitHub repo with the same name, and we're going to make a song together, and I'm going to be putting the code to make that song on that GitHub repo. I'm sometimes known as Messica Arson. So when I was in 3rd grade, we learned about arson one day, and the kids started calling me Arson Garson because my last name is Garson, and some genius was like, Messica Arson, because I was like always a messy child, and I was like, man, that'd be such a great punk rock alter ego, and I wasn't even like into pop punk yet or anything like that, but then I was like, oh, cool, that would be great someday, and I never knew what I was going to do with it, and now I write code and sample myself screaming on top of it. I used to be in a punk band, and now I do that, and it's really fun, and there's like a whole scene of other people that do it. I live in New York, and there's Live Code NYC, which is really awesome, and yeah, it's really great. And so I started doing it in Ruby, and I like Python better. I have like a Python tattooed on my arm, like that's the language that I most identify with, and I was like, yeah, can I do this in Python? And the answer is yes, I can. And so there's a library called Foxdot, which allows us to interact with our computer just as we were using a synth. There's like pre-made samples and things like that that are pretty awesome. And you can get this at foxdot.org/installation. And to launch it, you just type python-m foxdot with the capitalization like that. And you also have to start Super Collider as well, since Foxdot is a wrapper for another language that lets you interact with your computer through making music. And one of my favorite things about it is that if you go into the menu under tutorials, there's actually code that you can run, and it walks you through how to do it. And how I got started doing this was just changing the examples to make it my own through the tutorial, and it was so rad. So I'm going to make some music for you guys in a minute, but before that, if you guys are inspired to make music yourself, I want to hear what you build. So email me at jessicagarson.com or jessica.garson@gmail.com, or my Twitter handle, which is Jessica Garson. So yeah, let's make some music. But before we do that, let's actually see what the synthesizers are that we can work with. So we can kind of see here what we have going on. And let's get started making some music. So yes, it's working. So now let's put some numbers in here. Also, I make like weird discordant sounds, so it's not gonna. Thanks, guys.
Amazing. Phil is up next. Give him a big hand.
I want to talk for a moment about giving thanks in Python. Hi, my name is Philip James. I work for Patreon, and I care a lot about supporting and funding and sustaining open source. And so a couple months ago, I saw this tweet from a gentleman named Feras, who is a Node developer, and he published this library called Thanks that looks at your your package.json and pulls out all the people that have a thanks or a donation page set up. And at the time, I was at Tennessee, which is an amazing regional conference if you get a chance to go. And I thought to myself, well, wait, do we have this for Python? And if we don't have this for Python, should I build it for Python? So I did. Over the course of Tennessee, I was inspired by Feras to build Thanks for Python. The way it works, currently, you point it at a requirements.txt file, and it looks at a local database of package maintainers who I have found on the internet who have funding links or thank you links, and it spits out all of the people in your requirements.txt that are deserving of your contribution because you are using their software. One of the ways that we are going to keep open source sustainable is by making sure that the people whose software we are using get credit and, where possible, get funding from us for using their software. I am going to be sprinting on this somewhat. I'll be sprinting with the Beware group mostly, but if you're interested in learning more and sprinting on it, I will be here for sprints, and we can help make this better and help grow this part of the ecosystem. Additionally, we got something in Python before the Node people got it in NPM, which is in the official Python package documentation, there is now an example of how to put a link in your setup.py to indicate where you would like funding. So one of the things I'm going to be sprinting on is linking those two things so that thanks operates off your setup.py instead of your requirements.txt if you want to. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks, and I hope to have your support.
Amazing. I have a joke. What do you call an apposite pachyderm? I'm afraid this joke relies strongly on the audience knowing both the meanings of the word apposite and the word pachyderm. Apposite sort of means next to or in the right place. Irrelevant. All right, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Wes. Give him a hand.
Good morning. I'm Wes Wenham, founder of Woven. Together, we're going to be penetration testing the developer interview. So I spent the last 10 years as head of engineering at a startup. I did a lot of hiring, I screwed up a lot, and I learned a lot. 5 years ago, I was in an interview. It was going awesome. I was super pumped. This was an important position. We were geeking out about like our first Linux distro. He showed me some work he did, and it looked good. He seemed really smart, and I was just super excited because it was an important position. Fast forward 9 months, I was not excited. It had gone very poorly. I learned that I'd used some heuristics, and those heuristics had proven that this person was a really good rapport builder and communicator, but maybe not so good at the job they needed to do. And that was my fault. Like, I made that mistake. So, in penetration testing, you attack a system so that you can learn how to defend it. We're going to attack the interview process, and it's really vulnerable, guys. So a heuristic is a rule of thumb that kind of works in a specific context, but out of that context, it's wrong. So heuristics are our primary vulnerabilities in the interview process. We're going to exploit them. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? I want everyone to get an answer in your head. So you're probably thinking 10 cents. 10 cents is simple, intuitive, and completely wrong. If it was 10 cents, it'd be $1.20, and it's wrong. So 80% of people say 10 cents on this one. Let's do another one. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice. She also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Which is more probable? 1, Linda is a librarian. 2, Linda is a librarian and is active in the feminist movement. Think for a second. 80% of people say 2, the feminist librarian. But if you think a little farther, that's impossible. Every feminist librarian is also a librarian. It must be more probable that she's a librarian. Let's do a more relevant one. Okay, so on the left, we have a resume that has an extra math degree. It has the same experience, same project, and it has like a number, which is nice. We like numbers, right? On the right, less experience, same experience, but they use an action verb to start the sentence. Who thinks the left resume gets more callbacks? A few hands go up. The right resume gets twice as many callbacks in real life. Twice as many, like a second degree, and an action verb beats it. So the moral of this story is use action verbs and also apply on Monday morning versus Friday afternoon because you get a 5 times better callback rate. It's crazy. This thing is so broken. Our attack vector is stories, right? So Linda, the feminist librarian, is a better story. Starting the sentence with an action verb resume is a better story. As an attacker, we're trying to implant this story into the mind of the interviewer. We're exploiting the availability heuristic. On the left is an fMRI from someone that's listening to a list of information and processing it. On the right, that lit up brain, that's somebody that's hearing a story. They're really engaging with it. Stories are like the attack vector. When you're building a resume, you want to be the feminist librarian. Tell a story. Use action verbs and start your sentence with action verbs. On a phone screen, the heuristics are great for, most people don't have phone screen rubrics. It's just all gut feel. So their heuristics are very vulnerable. The biggest heuristics are excitement and confidence. So excitement, you should smile while you talk on a phone screen. People can hear it, it sounds different. Do some jumping jacks before. It's stupid that we have to do this, but that's what works. For confidence, asking questions about questions signals confidence. You can also do this trick where you repeat the last 3 words. A difficult coworker, and then you answer your question. It signals confidence. There's also this power move, the stall technique, where you just say, that's a good question, and then you answer, and you're now confident, and people are like, this confident person would be really good at this job. You can also ask some standard questions and mirror. So when I say mirror, if someone was talking and they're super excited like me, you should also talk and be really super excited, but if they were more reserved and thoughtful, you should be more reserved and thoughtful. Mirror their talking speed. This really, really works. Take-home tests. The heuristic there is, does this code look like my code? Most people don't have rubrics because rubrics are super hard. And when you spend time, you're probably getting an untimed take-home test, AKA a recommended time, and it's like, get this back in 3 days. You should plan on spending 3 to 5 times the recommended time to get that job. Most of the people that get that job spend more time. That's just the way it is. You have to play that game. And with that extra time, don't like build extra features and cool stuff and like add a REST API. Polish, polish, polish. Make that code the most polished code you've ever produced. Step away, refactor. Also, quick turnaround time signals excitement. So if it's like, get this back to me in 4 days, get it back in 1 day. And if you can't do that, set expectations. Be like, I'm on a vacation and I can't get it back, and then beat those expectations. That signals like excitement for a job. And then follow up. This is an easy one. Send like a 15-minute email where you say like, if I had more time, I would do this, and thanks for the opportunity. And that signals like excitement and enthusiasm, and you're like a go-getter. I'm going to be at Startup Row all day today. If you would like to talk about developer hiring and interviewing, I would love to talk to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Wes. Up next, we have Dorota, who's here to talk to us about versioning your data. Give her a big hand, please.
So my name is Dorota. This is my first PyCon and my first lightning talk, so thank you for coming. So I will be talking about Datalot. It's a tool that allows you for versioning your data. So we all love Git for various reasons, but I want to talk about 2 features here. So first of all, Git has distributed structure. So basically it means that content is available across all copies of the repositories. Git is also very efficient for managing the textual information. So it can store very efficiently like thousands of versions of your code. But if you have like 10 gig of data, those 2 features are not as great anymore, and especially the first one, that the content is available across all copies of the repository. So we all know about this, and we just simply don't commit 10 gig of data, and we definitely don't push 10 gig of data to our GitHub repository. But at the end, we're treating data as a second-class citizen within our software platforms. So we're using tarables to distribute it. We don't have any like good versioning. There's no really testing, and it's very difficult to share at the end. So if you are using data and you would like to treat your data in a similar way as you are treating your code with Git, I think you might want to check these 2 tools. It's Git Annex and Datalot. So Git Annex is built on top of Git. It allows managing files with Git without actually checking the content of the file into Git. So it only commits the symbolic links to the files. It also adds special remotes, so it can provide access to data content from various sources, including web, S3, Dropbox, and many others. And Datalot is the second tool I want to talk about, and it relies both on Git and Git Annex. It can also organize multiple repositories within one super data set. It can aggregate also datasets metadata, so it can be very useful if you want to make like efficient search among many datasets. And what is especially nice for this crowd, it comes not only with command line interface, but also with Python interface. So I will just I'll just show you a small example when I was using data a lot in my work. So at some point, So at some point, I had to provide data sets with the output of like very specific pipeline, and I put all of my data to Dropbox. But in order to share my data and have like proper versioning, I also create a GitHub repository. Like I created data set and later put this to GitHub. So you can see here, this is my GitHub. And if I go deep inside of my structure, you will see that I have like many different files, but if I click on the file, you will see that there is no content of the file, but it's just symbolic link to the content, to the file in the Dropbox. So, but because I have this repository, I can go to my Jupyter notebook, I can make it bigger, I can import Datalat API, and I can install these data sets. So by clicking here, it took like less than a second because basically it's not downloading any content. It's simply installing the data set. I can make it even bigger. So here you can see that I have like now in my file system like hundreds of symlinks, but no content. I can also check like at the content of specific directories. And if I found a file that I really needed, I can just download this specific file. So now it's the place that Datalat is actually downloading the file. And it's like 18 megas, so it will take like 10 seconds. But imagine how frustrated it would be if I have to like download the content of entire data set. So here like, okay, sorry. So with Datalat, you can be like, you can download at the same time like entire like data sets, entire like one directory or just one specific file. It was faster in the morning. Okay, so I will come back to this. So if you actually find this like useful, you might want to check the Datalat website to find like more feature on Datalat. Both Datalat and GitAnnex are open source, so if you want to work on this, you can check the GitHub and work with main developers. Okay, this is stuck, but it will be here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dorota. We have one final speaker for you, one final lightning talk. Terry, would you like to take it away first? Please give her a big hand.
Hi, I'm Terry, and I'm one of the people who runs Python's summer mentoring program, and I'm here to tell you that we need you, all of you. So we participate in something called Google Summer of Code, which is a global online mentoring program for university students that runs every summer, in North American summer. The way it works is Google pays the students, we provide mentoring and ideas, and the students give us code. It's pretty awesome. It's a great way to get new contributors to your project. It's a great way for students to get an introduction to open source and make some money. Python has been participating for the past 10 years as what we call an umbrella org, which means rather than just sponsoring projects related to the development of the Python language, we also sponsor a whole bunch of other groups that use Python for interesting things, be it security, lots of science. And each of these groups could apply on their own, but often they think, oh, we're really small, I don't want to deal with all this paperwork, let's have Python do it for us. Or they think, we've never done a mentoring program before, it would be really nice if we had some help, some advice, some support, and we do that too. And often people say, well, we wanted to start with this, and then once we've got a little bit of experience, we can go and do it on our own. So in our biggest year, we had over 70 students, and this year we have 15. And that's not a bad thing. That's a sign that a lot of the suborgs who had been working with us have grown up, grown their wings, and gone on their own. But this means we've got a great opportunity for people. We have a whole lot of space for new suborgs. So when I say we need you, I'm talking about I'd like to find some new open source projects working in Python who'd be interested in doing some mentorship, getting new contributors, having a good time. If you're interested, Basically, you need to be a Python open source project. We ask you to have 3 people. And people often are like, we don't need 3 people. I can mentor a student all by myself, and that's fine, but what if you get sick? Or what if you get hit by a car? That actually happened to someone. I hope it will never happen again. But this gives you some backup, and it gives the students a few extra people to talk to if they need different advice or they just want to have some other opinions. And you need a set of ideas for something that a student can do in 3 months. And we can help with that. It's a little bit hard to figure out what's a good sized project, and we have a lot, in fact, 10 years of experience doing that, so we can help. You can read all about it on our website. It's got a whole lot of extra advice and what it means to be a mentor. Every time I put out a call for open source projects, I get a whole lot of individuals who say, hey, I'm not part of any open source project, but I really want to help. What should I do? And I'm going to tell you right now that the easiest way to get involved is to join an open source project that's participating. The best mentors are the ones who actually are experienced in their projects and aren't trying to ramp up at the same time as the students. But if you need some suggestions, send me an email. I can often match you up to a project that says, hey, we'd like to participate, but we don't quite have enough contributors yet. Maybe there's someone who's waiting just for you. And if all of that sounds like way too much work, we've got a really easy volunteer opportunity for everyone in the audience right now. The students are just starting their code on Monday, and they're going to be posting blog posts. And we want to make them feel really welcome, to show them that this is a huge community of really enthusiastic people. So if you're interested and you've got a little bit of time next week while you're riding that buzz of, I just came home from PyCon and I'm going to change the world, there's a whole bunch of people who'd love to hear from you. Stop by, look at their blogs, say, hey, ask a question, say, I heard about you at PyCon and I'm really excited to see the work that you're going to do. So this is our 15 students. This is what you're going to see when you go to the blogs page. Click on one of their names and see who's already got something posted. You can do it right now from the audience while you're waiting for me to get off the stage even. So that's it. There's the URLs again, so you can have them. If you're interested, you can email all of us at gsocadmins@python.org. There's 4 people running this program. It's taken as many as 6, but this year we've got 4. And if you want to talk to me personally while I'm here, I'm Terry. There's my email address. I'm on Twitter. I'm wearing a bright red hat because I'm kind of short and it's really hard to find me in the audience otherwise, but you know, I'm also often wearing a nice hand knit whatever and knitting. Feel free to interrupt me and say hi, say, hey, I'm interested in this. Can you tell me more about the program? And I'll be here all next week sprinting with Mailman.
All right, thanks very much, Terry. I want to thank each and every person that came along to the lightning talks. I want to particularly thank all the people who came to the beginning of the lightning talk slot at 8:30 in the morning. Please thank each and every one of the lightning talk presenters who did their time. If you're interested in doing a lightning talk, please put your names up on the board. We have other sessions this evening. That is the end of the morning lightning talk slot, and I'd like to welcome back on stage. Please give a big hand to our wonderful, amazing, marvelous conference organizer, Ernest W. Dubin III.
I'm not exactly sure who he's referencing, so, all right, thank you. All right, so this morning we have 2 keynotes for you, but before we get into those, I just wanted to remind everybody about the PyCon Code of Conduct. The link right there is where you can go to find all the information about it, and the contact information is also on screen. If you need to make a report, you can report to anything there, or this doesn't seem, there we go, or to somebody wearing one of these shirts. Again, the contact information is, there, oh, no, now it's working, okay. Is right there, so snap a picture and, or find that on the site. It looks like there was some confusion about the junior ballroom versus the global center ballroom. These names are both for the same place. So for signage and for stuff in your program, that's where that is. It's sort of up these stairs and right out in this atrium here, if you had a hard time finding that yesterday. The PyCon Fun Run, that's going to be occurring tomorrow morning. Shuttles will begin departing from the lakeside entrance that direction at 5:30 in the morning and run every 10 minutes. So if you're running the PyCon Fun Run walk, you can go catch the shuttle there to go out to the course. Yeah, that's it. Did everybody have a good first day at PyCon? All right, well, we're going to get our second day started off with a keynote. Our first keynote of the morning is Ying Li. Ying Li is a software engineer focused on security at Docker, a speaker at PyCon in the past, and a longtime contributor to the Twisted project. I'm excited to welcome to the stage Ying Li.
Hi all. As Ernest said, my name is Ying. This is my first keynote, so thank you all for coming. Okay. So, yeah, hi. I'm a software engineer at Docker, and I develop security features for their projects and products. Prior to Docker, I worked on, from most recently to least, distributed systems, front-end JavaScript, and mobile games using the Unity game platform. So I had no previous experience whatsoever in security. But I'm the kind of person who takes first aid classes and gets regular vaccinations because I want to contribute to the common good of public health. I've also always been interested in personal security best practices because if someone compromises one of my own personal machines or accounts, not only is my personal information at risk, but it puts my friends at risk too if they've ever given me any of their personal information. Similarly, I felt that I should learn about security because more developers knowing about security issues is better for the software ecosystem as a whole. If someone compromises my application server, I'm going to have a really bad couple of days at work. But also, at the very least, an attacker could use that server as a platform to attack other, perhaps critical systems. And at worst, I've put all of my users at risk of targeted phishing or identity theft. So it was worthwhile for me to reduce the likelihood of that happening, or at least mitigate the damage if that happened. So I found some extremely talented awesome mentors and coworkers to teach me, a total newbie, some security engineering. So I found it to be really interesting and meaningful work, and diving into the deep ocean of information security was absolutely the right decision for me. But everyone here should care about security, and that doesn't mean that everyone has to follow me into a security-focused engineering role. You can each make a big difference to security by caring about it and by following a few basic checklists. You don't need to be an expert. I want to convince you that everyone involved in the creation of software or the operation of software systems has an important part to play to make the world of software a safer and more secure place. It's sort of like how you don't have to be a medical professional to be a parent. Keeping a tiny human being alive is a really big responsibility, and you'd think that extensive medical training would be a prerequisite. But if that were the case, our species would be extinct. So my partner and I recently had a kid, and not only do neither of us have medical training, I'd never even held a baby prior to my own. But so far, and keep in mind, the baby is pretty young, all we've done is make use of basic childcare information and checklists. Feed the baby, clothe the baby, bathe the baby, give them a nap, repeat, repeat, repeat. Other than that, we check in with the doctor at recommended intervals and whenever the baby is sick and injured. I also ask fellow parents for advice when I don't know what to do, but the situation clearly does not require a doctor yet. And the baby's still alive. We'd certainly like to think that as parents, yes, I kept a baby alive. We'd certainly like to think that as parents, we can make a big difference to our kids by caring about them and following these basic checklists. We don't all need to be doctors. Basic application security is a lot like this. You don't have to be able to hack into a web server to know that, oops. to know that you shouldn't bypass the security features that Django provides by default. You don't have to know the full TLS handshake in order to get the lock icon on your website. You can just read the excellent tutorials on setting up your web server by Ivan Ristic of SSL Labs or Hinek Shalak of PyCon fame. You don't need to go to Black Hat or DEF CON to keep up with security updates on your system or to keep up with security updates for your software dependencies. For security design reviews and reviews of particularly critical code, or when you actually have a compromise, you can call in someone with more expertise, but you don't need that expertise every day. It's pretty scary to be responsible for something you have no experience or expertise in, especially for something that seems very important. But it's something that everyone can do with the proper support system. I think that the Python community, which is already extremely friendly and supportive to newcomers, can be that support system. In fact, I feel so confident in the supportiveness of this community that I feel comfortable showing you a little project that I've been working on. It's something I've never done before. So my kid really likes books, and in a couple of years, I'd like to be able to tell them a little bit about what I do. I figured I'd run my idea for a children's book by all of you here first, before I start pitching it to publishers, because I've never written a children's book, and really I'm a little nervous about it. So okay, it's called The Professor of O's. Here goes. House of Pops is a Kansas-based company whose website lets people sell lollipops and cake pops. Dolores is a web developer at House of Pops. Dolores has been working very hard on a new feature that lets users share and compare recipes. She falls asleep after a long day. Dolores wakes up in a strange and colorful land that definitely is not Kansas, when suddenly, poof, a stranger appears before her. Welcome to the land of 0 days, or O's for short. I'm Gwen, a good hacker, who finds and reports vulnerabilities in software. House of Pops is vulnerable to server-side template injection, which can be escalated escalated into a full remote code execution. Oh no, Dolores says. This is terrible. I was really making good progress on my feature. I don't want to drop everything to fix this. I just want to finish my recipe sharing feature. Gwen says, O's is also full of evil hackers who will take advantage of these vulnerabilities instead of reporting them. You may already be a target, so you should fix this as soon as possible. Maybe you should go to Tooltown and ask the professor who lives there for a tool that can secure your site. Just follow this gray asphalt road. Gwen disappears in another puff of smoke. As Dolores walks down the road, she meets Tim, their DevOps engineer. A remote code execution vulnerability on the web server means that everything on our private network is at risk. Our logging server, our email server, our CI server. How can we protect all of our infrastructure? Dolores says, I don't know, but I'm going to go ask the professor for help. Why don't you come with me? A little further on, they run into Sakura, a data scientist who works at House of Pops. Our customer information and business projections are on that network. If customer data gets leaked, our customers won't ever trust us again. How can we protect all of our data? Dolores says, we're going to ask the professor about how to protect our application and our infrastructure. Come with us, and we can ask about protecting your data, too. A little further down the road, they see Leo, their test engineer. We can add a regression test for the fix, but how can we be sure there won't be a different remote code execution bug in the future? Dolores says, I don't know, but we're going to go ask the professor about protecting our website, our infrastructure, and all of our data from this vulnerability. Come with us and ask about protection from future vulnerabilities, too. They finally reach Tooltown and find their way to the professor. Please, professor, they ask, can you give us a tool that will protect our application, our infrastructure, and our data from all remote code execution vulnerabilities? Maybe a firewall. The professor replies, no, there's nothing that will protect you from all remote code executions. A firewall can protect you from some vulnerabilities, but it has a lot of drawbacks. And it's also possible that you've already been attacked, and a firewall won't help you then. Oh no, everyone from House of Pops exclaims. Our competitor, Sweet Cakes, was attacked last month. All their recipes were deleted, and their servers were used to mine candy coin. It took them over a week to restore everything, and they lost a lot of users. How can we fix this as soon as possible? Well, the professor says, Gwen reported that you have a server-side template injection. This is a part of a larger class of vulnerabilities called injection flaws, where a user provides some malicious input that is treated as code to be executed, instead of the plain text that it should be treated as. Dolores, you already have the tools to fix this easily. Your web framework automatically escapes all text and template parameters. You just have to use those parameters instead of manually using string interpolation by yourself. Great, Dolores says. And hey, this library will escape text in SQL too. If I use parameters, I won't have to do all the escaping manually, because sometimes I forget, and it's not always caught in code review. Tim says, I can look through our logs in our database for malicious user entries to see if an attacker has already tried this. But if they did, I'm going to have to rebuild all of our servers. The professor says, yes, but when you do, you already have the tools to prevent an attacker from getting from one server to another the next time. You already have a private network to prevent outside access to most of your servers. With multiple private networks, a server can have only the minimal access it needs to other servers, so an attacker can't move from one to the next to the next. That's right, Tim says. Our web server, Jupyter servers, and email server don't need to communicate at all. A little while later, Sakura says, my Jupyter servers are now on a different network, but what about all the data that I use? The web server needs to write logs and push metrics. The professor says, you already have the tools to limit the damage a web server can do. It doesn't need to be able to read or update those logs. And you could also delete any old data that you no longer need that you finish analyzing, so there'd be no way an attacker can get to it. Sakura says, we can run a cron job that deletes data older than 6 months. I'll also talk to Dolores about anonymizing and limiting the data that we collect as well. I don't need to identify customers, I just need aggregate information. Leo says, Dolores and I added an automated test for this input, but there are a lot of inputs that we need to test. The professor replies, you already run a linter on your code in Jenkins. You can add static code analysis tools that will look for injection vulnerabilities too. You can combine this with a code review checklist to make sure that reviewers check for string interpolation when they look at PRs. Leo says, and maybe we can run an attacker's web scanner against our staging instance so that we can find vulnerabilities before our code is deployed to production. Finally, a little while later, the House of Pop team finishes their work. Yay! After looking through all the logs, Tim says that we've escaped attack this time. Our patched app has been redeployed and our new tests pass. We appear to be secure. They high-five. The professor replies, not quite. Security is a process, not a checkbox, so you're never secure because you're never finished. But you've done a fantastic job improving your processes so far. You have to keep it up. Gwen says, until next time, because there will always be a next time, and throws another smoke bomb. Poof. And Dolores wakes up with a start in bed. She can't wait to talk to her coworkers. And that's all I have so far. What do you... Thanks. So do you all think that's a little advanced for a toddler? That's the feedback I've gotten from friends so far, that I really need to write some prequels first. Maybe software for babies? Or the automated testing spin-off, Baby Loves Continuous Integration. But it also needs a real ending, a happily ever after, because every children's story needs a happily ever after. I know the ending that I'd like to have, what happens after Dolores heads into work and tells her coworkers about her dream. But I need your help to make that ending possible. So JetBrains and the PSF surveyed over 9,500 Python developers at the end of 2017 in 150 countries. And it had some interesting insights into the participants' developer roles. In my story, Dolores is primarily a web developer, like 26% of the Python developers surveyed. But she actually represents all application or library developers, not just web. In my happily ever after, these developers become more familiar with the more common classes of vulnerabilities that affect them: injection of untrusted data, broken authentication, and leaking sensitive information, as well as what kind of controls are needed to mitigate these vulnerabilities. Using frameworks or libraries that provide tooling like auto-escaping user input and user models for authorization makes these things easier, but the developer still needs to be aware of these features and avoid bypassing them. If they can't use any of this tooling, then they will need to learn more about the different specific instances of these vulnerabilities and the control mechanisms needed to validate or escape input from users, validate credentials and permissions before every single user operation, and redact and protect any sensitive data that they return or display. OWASP, or the Open Web Application Security Project, is a great learning resource if a developer must do so. 27% of Python users focus on data science, either data analysis or machine learning. Data scientists, like Sakura, take great care to make sure that their models are accurate and their conclusions are sound. But too often these days, the data they use is collected in a single, increasingly large and increasingly vulnerable pile on the off chance that it might be useful. If there's a breach, not only could valuable business data be stolen by competitors, but personal data could be exposed to criminals, making the people in the data sets more vulnerable to phishing, hacking, and identity theft. In the happily ever after that I envision, Sakura and all data scientists limit the collection of data and restrict access to that data to the systems that actually need to process it. This doesn't have to be very draconian. It should be easy to ask for access to the data needed for analysis, but the request should be specific as to the type of data needed and how long it's needed for, and no additional data should be provided for that particular request. Data that's no longer needed for analysis should be deleted so it cannot be exposed if there is ever a breach. 9% of Python users focus on DevOps administration or automation. A compromise of a system is inevitable because it's impossible to make a system impenetrable. But it is possible to make a system resilient and to make it more difficult for an attacker to move laterally through a system once they've compromised a single point. In my happily ever after, Tim and all administrators reduce the likelihood of compromise by regularly and automatically applying security updates, and they mitigate the damage a single compromise can cause by isolating components from each other. Putting them on separate networks is good, and sandboxing the applications is good, for example, using containers or virtualization. If communication between components is needed, it should be through secured, authenticated channels like TLS. Each component should be provided with the minimal access to anything else that it needs. According to the survey, only 3% of Python developers are in testing. But everyone here has to verify that their code somehow works, right? Preferably in an automated way. Well, in my happily ever after, security is viewed as part of software quality. Tests for security should be part of your automated tests, along with everything else. all your other automated tests. This can include custom validation and authentication tests that you write yourself. This can include using fuzzing tools for input that you accept, using custom verification, configuration verification tools like SSL Labs or CFSSL scanners against a deployed instance of your code. Can include using static code analysis tools like Bandit or Python Taint on your code, or dynamic code analysis tools like BDD Security, again against a deployed instance of your application. Tests don't catch every bug, and these security tools won't either, but they can help prevent regressions and may signal an area of code that needs more review or a class of vulnerability that you may have overlooked. 9% of Python users are focused on education. In my happily ever after, when teaching software development, educators will bring up security early and often. Students should learn to think about the security implications of their system designs and code as much as they think about performance, concurrency, quality, or documentation. I'm particularly fond of formal threat modeling, so students learn how to think about securing their system, since there will always be new attacks, even if we eliminate the most prevalent ones today. Formal threat modeling can teach them to think about the different vectors and the different entry points a system can be attacked. In fact, I think the system analysis part of formal threat modeling is a very useful thing for Dolores, Sakura, Tim, and Leo to all do as well. System analysis means enumerating all the data the system collects and understanding how that data flows through the system. It means asking questions like, where's the input accepted? Where's data stored? How does data travel from one component to another? What sort of privilege is needed to access that data? Making system analysis part of the House of Pops process would let Dolores figure out where untrusted input comes from in the system, would let Sakura figure out which pieces of data are needed and whether access has been restricted, would let Tim determine which components can be segregated, and would give Leo a set of requirements that he could test for. As a bonus, the system analysis serves as a very useful piece of documentation for onboarding new developers. If we want to improve the state of software security, we need to care. But it can seem daunting. Aside from the commonality of really understanding how the system should work, each of my characters has their own little checklist that they need to follow. There's no one super checklist that anyone can follow to have guaranteed perfect security every time. There always seem to be new protocols and best practices to learn, more options that can be set, and that can get really discouraging. And sometimes it can feel like following simple rules that prevent issues like template injection is not worth it, because there's always some scary ultra-advanced attack in the news. But as much as advanced attacks are a real threat, and researchers and infrastructure developers will keep working on ways to defend against them, the basics matter a lot. And consistently doing security basics well can have huge positive consequences, because attackers won't always be using ultra-advanced attacks. They will probably stick with tried and true ones that still work. Since we're talking about consequences, let's talk about the most serious consequence and another area where getting the basics right can make a huge difference. As I mentioned, I'm a new parent. One of the scariest things about being a parent is the sad fact that children sometimes die. As parents, we don't want to think about it, but if we want our kids to grow up healthy, we have to be aware of the risks to them. We're scared, but we have to do something about it. One of the scariest risks to a baby's health is the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. This is just what it sounds like. Sometimes infants suddenly die for no apparent reason. Preventing this is obviously of great interest to pediatricians. There's no stem cell therapy, miracle drug, or vaccine to prevent SIDS. Instead, doctors use the most effective medical technique at their disposal to save lives, coming up with a simple checklist and relentlessly promoting it. In 1992, the American Academy of Pediatrics released some safe sleep guidelines. In 1994, they decided that it wasn't making enough of a difference to prevent SIDS, and they launched a campaign originally called Back to Sleep. Here's how it works. In the hospital after my kid was born, every single nurse I saw would say in a sing-song voice, "Back to sleep," and quickly rattle off a little speech about the importance of always putting my baby on their back to sleep on a firm, flat surface with no loose blankets. At the crack of dawn after I've given birth, "Good morning, new mom. Put your back to sleep. Put your baby on their back on a flat surface, no loose blankets." At lunch, a nurse came in, checked me and my baby, and said, "Back to sleep. We're going to put your baby on their back on a flat surface, no loose blankets." In the middle of the night, nurse came in to check the baby's vitals and said, "Good job. Back to sleep. They're on their back on a flat surface, yada, yada, yada." This may seem like too much repetition of a basic idea, but since the guidelines were published and the campaign started, the SIDS rate has dropped by over 50%. And note that this terrible chalk drawing is actually a copy of a graph, of a real graph that's on the CDC's website. That's roughly 2,500 fewer deaths per year than in 1994, because doctors and nurses were not willing to leave it up to chance that parents knew this information, or that they could even remember it in their sleep-deprived state. That's, at a conservative estimate, over 30,000 lives saved since 1994, in large part due to medical professionals coming up with a set of easy, simple guidelines that parents choose to follow. To be clear, babies still do die of SIDS and other causes every year. The Back to Sleep campaign didn't eliminate SIDS, and it certainly didn't eliminate childhood illness. But 30,000 lives saved is still pretty good and well worth the effort. The stakes in software security can be pretty high too, sometimes surprisingly high. You might just be working on a little open source tool for fun, but one day you could discover that it's used in a safety critical system like vehicle control software or medical software. Even if your code is not used in devices themselves, it might be in the systems used to manage devices or to deliver software updates to them. Maybe some of the users of your holiday recipe web app use the same password to log into the industrial control system where they work. So passwords stolen from your web app could shut down a whole factory because an attacker managed to link a user from your web app to the control systems where they work. Just like in the previous medical example, sometimes these very serious potential consequences can be significantly reduced by making a concerted, society-wide effort to follow a few simple steps. Cross-site request forgery, or CSRF, has been a known vulnerability in web applications since 2001. An attacker tricks a logged-in user into performing an action, like transferring money or changing a password, on a website without their knowledge. It's been so prevalent that the OWASP Top 10 Most Critical Web Application Security Risks has included CSRF in their list since 2010. The OWASP site documents several possible mitigations, which can be tricky to implement and get right. Luckily, web frameworks have decided to greatly reduce the burden of knowledge on developers by building in CSRF protection, enabling it by default, and extensively documenting the feature, making a checklist a developer has to follow much simpler. 1, use a framework or library that provides CSRF protection. 2, invoke it. Very simple. In 2010, OWASP claims that a web application had a 24% probability of having a CSRF vulnerability. In 2017, CSRF fell off the top 10 list entirely, and only 5% of applications reviewed by them had CSRF vulnerabilities. OWASP specifically credited this to the inclusion of CSRF protections in web frameworks and the developers making use of them. So awesome job, framework writers, for building in an easy-to-use security feature, and good job, developers, for knowing about the feature and not bypassing them. That's a pretty big reduction in the incidence of a vulnerability by simply following a basic checklist. I'd like to see that trend continue and to see more vulnerabilities fall off the OWASP and other top vulnerability lists. Similarly to the Back to Sleep campaign, though, even if everyone followed the most well-known, boring security practices, some number of applications will still get exploited. There will always be new vulnerabilities to defend against and new tools to learn about. But we can all make our applications safer, if not perfectly safe, by consistently and methodically following the security practices that we already know. Each of my characters represented a different developer role, but realistically, developers have multiple roles. All of us are responsible for some sort of sensitive data. We probably administer our own machines, if nothing else. We write some code, we make sure that that code works. We've all helped someone less experienced than us or written docs or tutorials. In my happily ever after, every one of us will care enough about software security and our users' privacy that we put some effort into learning about and applying best practices for our respective roles. It doesn't have to be a lot of effort, and it can be as simple as finding and following a checklist, but it has to be continued all throughout our work in software. We can't just stop at some point. In my happily ever after, we will have gotten good enough at propagating security knowledge, encouraging good security practices, and our security tools have gotten so easy to use that for most people, that effort will be minimal. And in my happily ever after, attackers won't be able to make use of the same types of exploit for multiple decades, for instance, CSRF or buffer overflow. And in my happily ever after, the security community becomes as accessible, inclusive, and welcoming to all as the Python community, because if we want everyone to feel as if they're responsible for and have a stake in improving the security of the software ecosystem, then they must also feel able and empowered to do so. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference and go forth and make your software and processes more secure. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, another round of applause for Ying Li. Thank you. Our next keynote for the morning will be Qumisha Goss. Qumisha is a librarian at the Detroit Public Library, specializing in technology and library instruction. A certified Raspberry Pi instructor, Q runs the Parkman Coders program at the Parkman branch of the Detroit Public Library, focusing on introducing children to computational thinking with Python. So please welcome Q.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hello, Cleveland, right? I'm not a rock star, so I'll never get to say that again. Okay. So this is the people in Python. So let's start with the story. Once upon a time, the Detroit Public Library, the Parkman branch, which is on the west side of Detroit, there was an unsuspecting library employee, that was me, and there was a ton of bored children. And my coworker said, you know what's big right now, Q? Coding. We should really start a coding program for the kids, right? I was like, that's so cool, you're gonna start this coding program for kids. And she's like, no, you're gonna start the coding program for kids. And I was like, I don't know how to code. She's like, no, it's fine, you're young, you can learn it, it'll be fine. And at the time, I was going into archives, so I was like, yeah, that'll be just like going into archives. So we started out using tinker.com, for our kids and different websites like Hour of Code, using different programs that were Scratch-esque, building blocks type things. And the kids had a ton of fun. We had 26 kids signed up for the first one, and we only wanted 20, or that's all we were expecting anyway. So it was so popular, we ran it again the second month. Still had an overcrowd of kids. And then we started to do it during the school year. But then our attendance started to trickle down and down and down. So I asked the kids, why don't you want to come to coding class anymore? And the answer, that's baby stuff. I don't want to keep moving these blocks around. I want to do something real. I was like, oh, you're 7, and that's baby stuff. Right? So, in response to the baby stuff, I decided to get some Raspberry Pis. So I thought this will be a little bit more for them, right? Raspberry Pis. And also at this point, when we graduated from baby stuff, the administration said, are they going to be hacking our computers? So Raspberry Pis it was. And then in true librarian fashion, I read some books. I read a lot of books. This is one of my favorite ones. And then I went to PyCon in Montreal. I went to PyCon's Education Summit, which was amazing. I watched young coders, and I got a lot of good information. And then they were like, you should go to PyOhio. So I went to PyOhio. Go to PyOhio, it's really great. So then I was like, okay. I met some cool people at PyCon and PyOhio. I got some microbits. I was like really getting into this now. Then Pi Academy, Raspberry Pi has a Pi Academy where they train you how to use Raspberry Pis and you become a certified Raspberry Pi educator. The library paid for me to go there, so I was in the first cohort of people in the United States. That little arrow, there's me in the middle. And so now I'm a certified Raspberry Pi educator. So I went through all the steps, thank you, to prepare myself because these kids said I was proposing baby stuff to them. So I had to get myself to a level where I could teach these kids something that wasn't baby stuff. So far at the library, I got my certification, I read a ton of books, did some tutorials. We have been doing all sorts of programs at Parkman Branch Library. This is from Teen Tech Week. Just a few weeks ago, we've been working on microbits. This girl, Joy, programmed a Galactica reconfiguration. She programmed the images herself and then coded them to music, which was really cool. My project didn't look anything like that. We also work with Minecraft Pi because I'm sure you've heard this a million times. All kids love Minecraft, right? So with the Raspberry Pi, we let them play Minecraft Pi first as an enticement. And then we introduce Idle, which I know, don't groan, right? And we let them code in their Minecraft game. And that was so exciting, especially because you can code active flowing lava in Minecraft Pi, and kids are like, yes, everything is flowing lava, or yes, everything is going to be exploding TNT. I don't know why they never get bored of seeing things explode. And then we started to do robot cars. And at this point, this is our third session of doing Parkman Coders. I found that little children were also coming. So my range was from 6 to 17 kids I had coming. Hard lesson learned about 6-year-olds. They're not ready to learn Python or much of anything just yet. One came from Minecraft Pi. He wrote 2 lines of code, and then he ran down the hall and rolled on the floor for the rest of the session. So that's when I learned. Probably had to separate this. So we started doing a junior version of our bigger projects. So the older kids made robot cars, and the younger kids got to color paper robots, and we put the circuits in it so they can light it up. And that will entertain them. So that's how Parkman Coders got started. And our next project coming up is going to be a greenhouse project. Kids are going to make time-lapse cameras to watch their plants grow, and they're going to build water moisture sensors. So that's what we're doing next. One of my most proud and crowning achievements for this program is on the right-hand side is a picture from when we first started, and on the left-hand picture is a picture from this past year. 3 of the kids in these pictures are in both pictures. We have about 6 kids that have been doing this with me as long as I've been doing it. So I'm really proud of those guys for sticking through it. And one day they'll be here, or I'll be working for them, or you'll be working for them. But on to the issues. Every silver cloud has its lining, right? We've all got some issues. For me, it was getting materials, getting a budget. Kids were in idle, getting weird, crazy error messages and freaking out. Why is it red, Miss Q? Why? And I was like, I don't know. We're just going to look at it again. Right? Because I was a beginning programmer too. I'm like, this is a part of the process. Failure and error messages are a part of learning, right? So we had a few minor issues for our actual program, right? But I also want to talk about a sliding scale of issues, right? So there's issues running our program, but also there's the tech world's issue, right? And I'm sure you've all Googled diversity and technology. Everybody knows about this, right? How do we get women and minorities, right? Where's the diversity? Why aren't you diverse enough? Well, I'm here to tell you that women and minorities are not unicorns. We are magical, but it's not a mystery what it takes to sustain us, okay? It's the 3 basic things that it would take to sustain any great relationship, right? If you ever had a good relationship or a bad relationship, you know this, right? Respect for a person as a human being. Just acknowledging that you're a person and I'm a person, right? And then here's the tricky part, engaging that person, right? Saying, hi, how are you? Ask them a question. Listen to the answer they give you. Or if they ask you a question, answer the question, right? And the third thing, value, right? People don't want to stay with a person or a company that doesn't make them feel valued. I don't feel valued if I make less money than this guy over here and we do the same thing. That's not value. If you can stick to those 3 things, respect, engage, and value, you can retain people, right? But we, however, that's a middle issue. That's not even the top issue that we're going to talk about today. Other issues, my kids' issues. These are the biggest issues to me. So, poverty. The kids that come to my program, they are poor. And kids know that they're poor, okay? They struggle with it. So if I'm teaching kids Python, it kind of hurts their process if they really enjoy it and they can't go home and do it themselves because they can't afford a computer. Or their family can't afford a computer. And then I say, I'll give you a Raspberry Pi. And they can't afford to get the things they need to hook up to it. They can't get a keyboard. They can't get a mouse, right? Or even worse, they don't have internet at home. These are real issues. And it's in my book more important than why can't you keep minorities. You got to help them get there. Also, illiteracy is an issue. So we're teaching kids how to program, but we also have to backtrack and make sure that they're reading properly. I had a kid come to the library just last week. He's 9. He said, I want to play Roblox. I said, okay. He's like, can you help me? I said, okay. We go to the computer, and I said, click here, and I said, now you're in Roblox, find the game. He's like, I don't know what to do next. I was like, what do you mean you don't know what to do next? Like, find the game you want and click on it. And I realized he wasn't reading the screen because he couldn't read. And so he needed to create an account, and he said, what do I put here? I said, well, just use your last name and something for your username. He said, I don't know how to spell it. And that was devastating to me. And of course, when I get back, I'm going to work with that kid extensively, and I've already put the children's librarian on him. We're going to work on him. But these are boundaries to them. Hunger. If you've ever been hangry at 2 or 3 in the day, you already know hunger is nothing to play with, right? You can be hangry, and that'll ruin the rest of your day and your coworkers' day and your family's day. And I've had kids come to me and say, Miss Q, can I have some snacks to take home with me because we don't have any food at home, right? And that's heartbreaking for me to know that they don't have the basic things that they need. Crime and violence is a reality for these kids. They're used to it, unfortunately. I had a kid come and say, Miss Q, he's like, have you ever been to jail? And it's like, what? It's like, have you ever been to jail? What's it like? I was like, why are you asking me if I've ever been to jail? He said, oh, well, my cousin's going to jail. He broke into an old lady's house so he could get some money. But that's his world. That was just a normal conversation for him. Right? There are more pressing issues for people than the tech industry trying to maintain diversity. But with all of this, those kids have lack of resources. They face a lot of different adverse situations, but those kids are strong because of it. When you lack resources and you face adversity, that becomes resourcefulness and resiliency, right? Those kids are always doing more and more and surprising me. And that leads to innovation, right? And sometimes for good and sometimes not so good. We have, Detroit is experiencing a revival now. So there's all sorts of cool hipster things like electric bikes downtown. And so I found out that in the neighborhood around the library, kids were stealing lawnmowers, taking the engines off of them, putting them on bikes, and making their own electric bikes, which I was really impressed with. I was like, holy crap, I would have never thought to do that. Of course I don't want them to steal lawnmowers, but oh my God, I can't believe they could put the engine on the bike and actually make it work. And no one's been injured yet, so that I hear. Other times, we got kids that exploit systems. The library allows you to use the computer for 1 hour with your library card. We had a kid come to the library and found out that you can register for a library card on the website and fill in this information and get a library card. But you need to have a Detroit address. We had a kid in the back row, and I'm like, why is there a crowd back here? He had created 20 library cards and passed them out to his friends so they could play Roblox longer together. Right? So, these kids are innovators, okay? So for me, this talk is really about opportunity, right? These kids are great. They just need an opportunity. And so for us, that's my little Python man, right? We're teaching them Python because everything else is baby stuff, but also because it gives them exposure, right? These kids live with what they know. We want to expose them to something more than what they know. And Python is all over the world. Exposure to Python is exposure to the world, an opportunity for those kids. It's empowerment, too. When you learn how to code, the first thing we like to do is break somebody else's code because you're empowered to mess stuff up or to make stuff better. And it's good for them to know that you have the options to do more than what someone says you can do, right? You can use your superpowers for good or evil, and we let them test it, but then we encourage them to do good. Right now, they're mostly consumers, right? All the kids go to the same schools. They come to the library. They had a homework project. The teacher says, you have $1 million. How are you going to spend it? So the teacher mandated that they had to go to college. So they all had to pick a college. But then after that, everybody's projects were the same. They bought a house, a mansion usually, a car or two, a house for their mom, an iPhone, and several new pairs of shoes. Without exception. And I want these kids to know that their goals, their aspirations should not be to own an iPhone, right? Their aspirations should be to be the next iPhone, to create a better iPhone, that they can do that. They're not just consumers, they will be the next innovators. So what's the point? The point is greatness. These kids have greatness in them. They just need an opportunity to develop that greatness. And for you, don't be selfish. Cultivate greatness in others, because no one has ever become less great by helping somebody else become great. If you need some help, here's some suggestions. Ask a question, remember? Answer a question if someone asks you, and always remember to listen. Actually listen. Don't hear it. Actually listen and take it in. Number 2, my personal favorite, support public libraries, because we're awesome. Right? And support educators and support people. Remember, this is about people. What is Python without people? Or mentor someone. Mentor someone that doesn't look like you, someone who's from somewhere different than you. Go out on a limb and help somebody else. Okay? And that's all I got for you. If you got questions or comments or advice, you can find me. Come on. Thank you. Good. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.